Hi, Dio here at Diosphere, a place for everyone interested in productivity, motivation and freedom. In the previous video we talked briefly about what is Linux, but today we will dive deeper into the file system. Step by step, you will learn everything you will need to be more comfortable to work with Linux. But before we start talking about the file system, if you are watching this video from another Linux distribution, you will notice that things look differently. And that's because every distro has its own look and feel. I am on Arch Linux using the XFCE desktop environment. We will talk about desktop environments in another video, but I assure you that you will be able to understand pretty much everything that I will be talking in this video today. So let me begin. In Linux, everything is a file. From a simple directory to executable file, or known as binary. From script or any other text formats like txt or docx to an image like this one. And that's the first thing that everyone should learn, that in Linux everything is a file, including the directories, also known as folders. Here I have opened my file browser or file manager. Every distribution has its own file manager. Right now, because I'm using the XFCE desktop environment, it comes with the Thunar file manager. If you are on Linux Mint, you have your own file manager called Nemo. And the same goes for every other distribution. All distros has different look and feel, like I said before. From the file manager, you can navigate to your home folder that is specified at the left sidebar with your username. From here, you can find all of your files. And as I said before, when I talk about files, I mean everything, starting from the directories and all of your pictures, music, documents, downloads, etc. Also, from any file manager like Thunar, you are able to go and see the whole system, and that's the root directory. The home directory is equivalent to the documents directory in Windows, and you can easily find the home directory also from the root directory or the file system. If you navigate to your root directory, you can see here that you have your home directory from where you can open and see what users use this machine. In this case, I have only one user here, and that's my username, Dio. And if I open and click on this directory, I am back to my files. So basically this one here is just like a shortcut to your home. But nevertheless, you need to understand that the home directory is a part of the root directory. You can do pretty much everything in the home directory, starting from creating new folders. Also, you can create new files like empty text file or documents like from LibreOffice. LibreOffice is a Office suite, similar to the Microsoft Office. You can create files. You can rename files. Just right-click them, rename them. For example, important doc. And also you can drag and drop files in different directories. For example, this important document into my new folder. And like in every operating system, you can also remove by right-clicking on them and move to trash. On some distributions, you also have the option to directly remove or delete the file. Here on my Arch system, I have moved to trash. And if you move files to trash, you can find them in the trash directory. So let's go and right-click on trash, and you can empty your trash directory. And that's very straightforward. But let's go and see the file system of Linux. If we click here on file system, on some other file managers, this will be presented as root. But nevertheless, it's the same thing. So if I click on file system, I know for sure that I'm in the top of the hierarchy because I can see all of those different directories. And by this symbol up here, the / represents that we are in the root directory, the top of the hierarchy in the file system. So let's go through these directories one by one and talk briefly about them, everything that you will need to know in order to understand how Linux works. So here we have the bin directory. Bin stands for binaries, and here you can find executable files and some scripts. The main purpose of those executable or scripts files, or in one word, binaries, is to launch or execute the program that we want to use. For instance, Firefox. I know for sure that I have Firefox, the web browser, installed on my system. You can see it down here on my dock. The executable file for Firefox to launch can be found here in the bin folder. If I open bin, you can see all of those different files or executables. And if I search for Firefox, I can find the dedicated binary file. And this script, in this case, or it could also be an executable, is used to launch our programs. In the binary folder, you also have some executables for commands that are used in the terminal. We will not speak about the terminal for now, but just to know, in order to use some of the features in the terminal, some of the commands, they need to exist in a form of binary files in the bin folder. In that case, we will be able to launch those commands when we are working in the terminal. Similar folder to the bin folder is the sbin folder, and sbin stands for system binaries. If we want to do some administrative tasks, like for example, updating our system or upgrading some packages or software, we need to have the administrator rights, or in other words, we need to enter the super user password, like in Windows, run as administrator option. So basically in the system binaries, you have binary files, just like in the bin folder, but also including all of those programs that need to be run as administrator. Okay, moving forward, we have the boot folder, and this folder is used just about that, to boot our system. If we don't have this boot folder, Linux cannot start or cannot be booted into our distribution. So you don't need to mess around with boot, with this directory. The dev directory stands for devices. And here you can find a long list of device-specific files. For example, all of the hardware that is connected to your system, your speakers, maybe mouse, keyboard, or if you're like me and do some music production, you also have external audio card. The etc or etc folder, also known as directory for editable text configuration files, is the place where all your configurations or config files lives. Some of the files that can be found here in this folder program specific, but most of them are system wide, and you can find pretty much everything. For example, you can find config file for the computer's name or the host name. You can change the host name if you want to do that by modifying the config file in the etc folder. You can find config files about, for example, mirror links. You can modify that specific config file. So basically in etc, you can find specific config files about programs or system-wide. If you want to configure your system, the configuration files 90% of the time can be found here. We talked about the home directory. It's where your users live. So if you go to home, you can see list of your users. If you click on one of them, you are in the home directory of that specific user. So let's go back into our root directory. Here you can see we have two similar directories called lib and lib64. And lib stands for libraries. Libraries that applications uses to perform various functions. Those libraries are required by the bin files or the binaries. If we don't have the libraries of program, for instance Firefox, if Firefox doesn't have any library, the binary file to launch Firefox will do nothing. So libraries communicate with binaries in order to launch programs properly. Maybe you noticed that these four folders, the bin, sbin, lib, and lib64, has its own badge on it. And this badge represents that these folders or directories are links. They exist in another directory, but we have them here presented in our root, in the top of the hierarchy, just for more convenient use. They are part of the user folder. Okay, so now let's go with the next folder here. We have the MNT folder. The MNT folder, or also known as mount area, is where we can manually mount partitions, external hard disks. By default, this directory is empty, but if we want to mount some external hard disk, we can mount that hard disk manually and can be easily found from here. But you also need to know if you're plugging a USB stick, that USB stick is automatically mounted. And this MNT directory is only used with manually mounted devices, or for instance the external hard disk. But if you plug in a USB stick, it will be automatically mounted, and the automatically mounted devices will go to run media. Right now we don't have anything here, but for example, I have my USB with the Arch installation in it. So if I plug my USB, you can easily find that USB from the sidebar because I'm using this file manager. But as soon as I click here, you can see all of the files in the run media folder, as I said it before. So basically everything that is automatically mounted will be easily found in the run media. Okay, let's go and unmount this USB stick. Now we have the opt directory, and also known as optional directory. This directory is by default empty. 99% this directory will be empty. Basically, this opt directory is used for manually installed software from any third-party vendors. Here you can see Jitsi Meet Desktop. This is an application similar to Zoom for video meeting. If you have some software that doesn't need to be installed into your system to run, maybe everything that your software needs is to just extract all of the files somewhere and then run the application. You can have all of your software extracted somewhere here in your home, or you can go to the dedicated folder, opt or optional directory, where you can extract software there, or you can manually install applications and just put them over here. Okay, moving forward, we have the proc directory, where you can find files that have information about the system processes and resources. Proc stands for processes. Every process is in a special directory named after the process ID. So if I open this directory, you can see a long list of files with specific identifiers or IDs. And those IDs are just numbers. If you know the ID of a process that maybe is doing some problems to your system, you can find that process here and search for some solution. And something that I forgot to mention is that all information in the proc directory is not saved on the hard drive, meaning that on every boot up, this proc directory will automatically be created every single time. So basically, those files are not hard drive related. Okay, now we have this root directory. It has the same name as the top of the hierarchy. The root directory is directory for the root user or the administrator. It's similar to the home directory. Home directory is for the regular user, but the root directory is for the administrator, and you don't have access as normal user to all of the files that are stored in the root directory. If I double click this, you can see that it fails to open because we don't have permission. So if you enter with the terminal, for example, or on some file managers, you can right click and run as administrator. You will be able to see all of the files that are stored in the root directory. The root directory is not the top of the hierarchy in the file system, because we know that the top of the hierarchy is with a symbol /. It's also called root. It's the root directory for the system where all of those other directories lives. But the root directory in the system here is for the administrator. I believe that is easy to understand. We have regular users in the home folder or directory. We also have root user or the administrator of the system. And this directory is where the administrator has the only rights to put any kind of files. Okay, now we have this run directory. You know that when you mount any USB stick, it will be automatically mounted in run media. Also in this folder, you can find files with runtime information that is deleted on every reboot or shut down. This folder is similar to the proc folder because these two folders are automatically created on every boot up of the system. The processes use the information of the run time. They like to work together. Okay, now we have the server folder or the service directory. And here, this will be empty. So you can see we have some other directories, but they are also empty. And basically, if you are running some web server, you can have files here or some FTP server. All of the files that will be stored in this SRV directory can be easily found from the internet. The system folder is the place to communicate with the kernel. If I open this, you can see some kernel related folders. And again, this is another of that directories that the normal or the regular user doesn't need specifically to do anything here. The temp folder is where the temporary files goes. On a regular basis, it will save a copy of what we are writing in some software. Or maybe you are producing some music, maybe you're editing a video. On a regular basis, in the temp folder, you can find some saved copies of that statement of the software. If the software crashes, you can search those save copies in the temp folder and you can start from where you left. On every reboot, files are deleted from the temp folder, but in some case, maybe we have some files that cannot be deleted from the reboot of the system. That means that you will need to come manually here in this folder and delete them. And of course, we will talk about system maintenance in another video. User folder, or also known as Unix system resource. This is the place where non-essential software can be found, programs that are installed by the user. And as I said before, here you can also find all of those linked directories, the binaries from the bin and sbin, and the libraries from the lib and lib64. Those directories can also be found in the user. So if I go to user, there you have it. We have the bin, the sbin, the libraries. There are also another folders and the share, for example, and the local that I will talk about in a second. But just to know that for a regular user, these folders are very important. The home folder and the user folder. In the user folder is basically where the applications are installed. You can find every binary, every system binary, you can find every library, and here in the shared directory, you can find, for example, maybe backgrounds. So this is all of the backgrounds in my system for now. You can also find fonts, you can find some themes. So in the shared directory, those are system-wide and program-specific files like icons, fonts, sounds, maybe some scripts that can be used from other programs. The program and all of the components of the program is basically separated in multiple folders, like all of the binaries from the programs goes to the bin folders, all of the libraries from the programs goes to the lib folders, and everything else goes to the share folder. If you are installing a program from source code, and that's not something that we will talk in this video, but all of the manually installed software that is installed from source code will be located in the local folder. So if I click on local, it's basically the same thing. We have the binaries, we have the share, we have the libraries. So in local is everything that is installed from source code. So that's the user folder, most important directory in the Linux file system. So we have the home and we have the user. And the last but not least, we have the var, or variables, is expected to grow in size. Is similar to the temp folder, but in var you can also find some other stuff like for printer queues, like log system files. So when you are cleaning your system with some cleaning utility, you are basically removing some temporary files from the var and from the temp folder, and also some cache file that is stored in a hidden directory. Now maybe you're asking yourself, what is a hidden directory and how can I find them? So let's go back to my home. This is my user. And here you can see, if I go to view, show hidden files, I have all of those hidden directories. And basically those directories or files are used to store configuration of programs. Like for example, we have Mozilla for the web browser, we have some config files. We also have some icons here. We also have something about our audio driver. And we also have a dedicated cache directory from where you can easily delete all those files. In cache goes some of the program's data. Also, just to know that if we want to create maybe a hidden directory for some reason, we can go right click, create a folder as usual. but before the name of the folder, we just want to include one simple dot. And this will be recognized in Linux as hidden folder. If I create this folder now, you will not be able to see it unless you click this show hidden files. Now you can find your new folder here. So there you have it, everything that you need to know about the Linux file system. And for every newcomer to Linux, you pretty much need to know how to use the home directory, because most of the time you will work in the home directory. That's everything you need to know about the Linux file system. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe on this channel, and click on the bell icon so you will never miss any upcoming videos. And I will see you in the next one.